Hello and welcome. By becoming the first African to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, he gained international recognition needed to validate his role as a social and political watchdog in his country. This week on 101, meet writer, critic and poet Wole Soyinka. Born into an extended family of activists, he soon discovered the importance and impact of taking a stand. But Wole Soyinka's early years saw some of Nigeria's most turbulent times as it struggled with a string of oppressive leaders in the post-British colonial state of independence. Guided by his politically active parents and a family blending modern Christian and traditional Nigerian beliefs and values, the young Soyinka benefited from both Western and Eastern influences, being educated in the arts in Nigeria and Britain. On graduation from college, he'd already produced prize-winning literature and drama and received public acclaim, and started to add his voice of political dissent against corrupt leadership in Africa, particularly Nigeria. In 1986, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature, becoming the first black African to receive the honor, although Soyinka points out that the 1957 Algerian Nobel laureate, author Albert Camus, was also African. Although still a formidable voice on African issues, Soyinka says it's now time for younger generations to take the lead and give the troubled continent the chance it deserves. Wole Soyinka, it's great to have some time with you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, I know you say with good humor that really perhaps your role has diminished, you don't have as much to do now in Nigerian politics and society, and that it's time for younger lions to roar, perhaps. But do you see anyone who's really taken on the mantle of what you've been doing for nearly half a century?
Well, they won't take it up exactly the same way. I mean, one thing which I say to the young people is that they've got to define their own methodology, their own approach to Nigeria's problems. Even when I formed the political party, which incidentally just backfired on me because I realized they were not about to let me go. And I kept telling them, listen, it's you. This is your party. It's your. But no. They wanted me to stand the election. They wanted me to come and campaign for them. And they wanted to put my picture on posters. And I said, you cannot do that. I'm bowing out.
But I think you really started that political party, and we spoke around that time, more to make a point than to actually be a serious contender, wasn't it?
Not for me to be a serious contender. No. I was never, not either serious or unserious. I was never a contender. But I was distressed, quite frankly, by the recycling of old, jaded material, but very well-heeled, very wealthy material, same old rogues, robbers, who, it was kind of a vicious cycle. They got into office to steal money, which was then used to get them back into office, or their surrogates, their clones, and this spiral continued forever. And the young people come to say, come to me and say, what do we do about it? And so I said, okay, there's a kind of movement which we can turn into a party. Let's do that, and you have it.
So what motivates you? What drives you? What's your passion nowadays, then?
I've wondered about that very often, because I set for myself, incidentally, several benchmarks for retirement. One was 49, I remember. Actually, yeah, you can laugh. But
I'm there, you see, so
I actually seriously thought I could pull out completely at 49 and devote my time completely to writing, lecturing, things like that. But, when your environment is filthy, and filthy either morally or physically or whatever, then I have the kind of temperament which makes it impossible for me to function in what I really want to do. And so part of the involvement in politics is really, if you like, a selfish cleaning my environment so I can do what I really want to do. It's all very personal.
Over the years, you have directed your fury at sort of black Africa's political and cultural failures. Why do you think it is the continent has gone down that path for so long?
Well, there are multiple reasons. First of all, in many African countries, the colonial powers did not leave. Before leaving, they left surrogates behind. And usually those surrogates were the most backward, most feudalistic in thought, most reactionary. And, of course, once there, they were not about to let go. And that has been the history of many of the colonial, ex-colonial nations on the African continent. The problem of fixing it means that these young people, when they actually break through, they're not starting from zero. They're starting from minus. They have to clean out the old brigade. And of course, they're very, very tenacious and very powerful. So it's a spiral of bad leadership.
Hasn't Africa, though, in the first decade of the 21st century, managed to redefine itself, move away from that, what we call the 3D image of death, disease, and disaster?
There has been some encouraging examples. For instance, you had Tanzania under Nyerere. That is one, even though Tanzania is one of the poorest, and was under Nyerere one of the poorest countries, Nyerere showed what could be done even with minimal resources. You have the example, of course, of the man I call the avatar, Nelson Mandela. Then you have younger people like Sankara, for instance, before he was killed. Then you have not so glamorous quote-unquote success stories as Ghana, which got rid of dictatorship and has really been not just pushing the cause of democracy in a genuine way, but actually revamping its economy. So there have been examples here and there. And of course, in terms of social improvement, tackling diseases, there has been a great deal of commitment. Yes, it's not entirely bleak.
Now, I want to take you back to being born in Nigeria, in the Abeokuta town in the Ogun region in western Nigeria, still ruled by the British at that time. And I wonder, through your young eyes, what you saw of the place at the time.
Well, I saw the first line, at first hand, the first line, nationalists and, if you like, radicals. I was fortunate, for instance, to have been quite close to my uncle, Reverend Ayoranzum Kuti, and his wife, Bere from Ayoranzum Kuti, who led the Women's Charge against a corrupt and very oppressive monarch, and actually chased him from the throne. And at that age, I was very little, so I was a very useful courier for moving between the legs of people and the police and so on, and delivering messages. My mother was involved in that. She was a lieutenant, if you like, to Mrs. Kuti. So I got my my teething, my political teething quite early. I enjoyed it, I liked it, but more importantly, I listened and I understood what the issues were. So from very, very early age, I was able to discern, if you like, political right from political wrong.
Now, your family was quite was prominent in the region, and of course, your father was a headmaster at a school, Samuel Ayodele.
Ayodele,
and,
yes.
And you called him S.A. and sort of jokingly S.A.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I actually thought he was S.A. Because his friends would come and salute him, S.A., S.A., S.A. And because I was always writing essays in school, and it stuck.
And your mother, Grace, why did you nickname her the Wild Christian?
Because she was a wild believer. She was really a wild believer. She was the kind of person, her Christianity governed everything. If she was pouring, I'll tell you this, if she was pouring oil from a cup into a bottle, and this is an image I've never forgotten, and she had quite steady hands, but if the hands slipped a little and some of the oil poured down, she'd say, oh, my sins are many. God is angry with me. Can you imagine that? It's a question of pouring oil from a bowl into a bottle. That was the kind of person she was. So I found her Christianity on the wild side, and so I call her Wild Christian. And of course, she was also wild, disciplinary-wise. She beat the living hell out of me, because I was a bit of a difficult child.
And of course, being the activist in your family too.
Yes, she was. I took after her sometimes.
You mentioned this issue of her being, strongly Christian, but you had that interesting mix of Christian and Yoruba indigenous religious beliefs that blended in your family. How do you think that shaped your view on faith?
I wouldn't say that it blended so much with my immediate parents, but my grandparents, my grandfather was an out-and-out Orisha person, and when he was converted, he never gave up his real origins. He was a good Christian. He even had a Christian title and so on, but he never abandoned the former gods. And what I saw as a child with my imagination, which lent itself very much to fusing images, what I saw was that the saints appeared to me to be the same as the masquerades. And this is the way I related to both Christianity and traditional religion. In other words, I had an eclectic approach to phenomena as a child.
And eclectic family members. You're a cousin of the father of Afrobeat, Fela Kuti, as well. And I wonder what kind of relationship, if any, you ever developed with him.
Oh, yes, yes. He was studying in England at the same time as I was. He was a junior sibling. And in my very first appearance on stage, on the British stage, when I had an evening, by appearance I mean my work, when I had an evening of half one-act play, and then the first half was poetry reading, I actually brought him to accompany on his saxophone to accompany my reading, and that was the first time Fela was on a theatrical stage, and that was also my debut, if you like, on a British theatrical stage. And we were we got up to quite a lot of things, he with his music, me with my theatre, and at one time we called it the Commonwealth. We had a huge rambling it was an apartment, and everybody came in there. I can't remember how we paid the rent. We shared everything which existed. You know, our girlfriends brought food, and it was a marvelous period.
He was also an activist too. He was quite active as well, speaking of.
He became much later an activist. During this period, I'm talking about the late 50s, early 60s, for instance, Fela was just into his music, nothing else. He didn't believe in any political. He thought it was a waste of time. He didn't understand what it was about. And he had his satori when he came to the States and met this militant woman of hers. That was when Fela began to change.
You had most of your high school education and secondary school education in Nigeria, and you were actually a very good student. You won literary prizes and so on. What was going through your mind about what you would do as a sort of career?
Well, like all young people, I went through various phases. I was going to be a sailor. I was going to be a pilot. And then my parents wanted me to be a lawyer. And I didn't mind, really. I rather liked arguing. So all seemed natural. So I didn't really have a notion of being a full-time writer, which I'm not till today, by the way. I still have to teach for my living, but at least to be a professional writer. So I was going to do a bit of everything, and I never really made up my mind until I came to England and began to read a lot more and meet writers, and then develop my writing.
Ironically, you did have some material broadcast on Nigerian radio stations before you left for England, didn't you?
Yes, I have the honor, distinction of having written the first radio play for the young Nigerian Broadcasting Service. I would hate to see that play today, but anyway, but it was broadcast. I remember it very well.
And then off to Leeds University in England, 1954, you were there. To study English literature, how did you adjust to that, moving from Nigeria to England?
Oh, with the greatest ease. The only thing I never adjusted to was the cold. Outside of that, it was from student life to student life. And once I discovered that the white people didn't have tails or hooves, I got on pretty well.
Now, some of the work that you wrote while you were studying England, your first major piece actually in 1958, The Swamp Dwellers, and soon afterward you had The Lion and the Jewel, they actually were broadcast back in Nigeria while you were in UK.
That's right, yes. There's one... Mr. Jeffrey Axworthy, he was then in the English department of the University of Ibadan, and he came and somehow he got hold of the play, and the next thing I knew, he sent it to. It was staged in the university, but during that time, I was also sending short stories to the radio station in Nigeria. I kept up my contact with them, but I think it was Axworthy who took the play there, from my recollection.
And actually, before you moved back to Nigeria, you had a brief marriage as well. Didn't work out to a student at university?
Yes. No, it didn't work out, no.
But then, so back in 1960 to Nigeria, and you were studying drama, I think then, also African drama.
I was doing research in traditional dramatic forms, touring all over the place.
The late 1960s were a very turbulent time in Nigeria, and you were a respected figure and starting to get involved with some of the issues that were taking place. And you got yourself caught in the middle of the effort by the Biafra region, and briefly state, to break away. Tell me what happened, because you ended up going from mediator to becoming someone who was considered a traitor and a troublemaker.
Well, there had been a coup. Let's begin from there very quickly. There was a coup the coup was justifiably described as, to some extent, as being one-sided. In other words, the result of it, the appearance of it, pitted one part of the nation against another. So there was a reprisal killing, very, very killing. 3 waves, by which time the Igbo justifiably considered themselves outcasts from the rest of the nation and no longer felt they belonged. So the Biafrans, in my view, were absolutely right to have seceded at that stage. And I went across to see them, to persuade them not to secede if it was possible, but to join hands with the progressives of the other parts of the nation in forming what we called a third force to resist both the government in power and the extreme nationalists of Biafra. Well, that didn't sit very well with the federal side. I was accused of buying arms for Biafra, the whole nonsense, and so I was imprisoned.
Now, during that time in prison, you wrote some of your most renowned work as well. I gather they didn't give you writing paper and pens and utensils instruments to be able to write with, so you actually ended up writing on toilet paper, including The Man Died.
Yes. Everything was done to break my mind by keeping me in complete isolation, deprived of writing materials, reading material. But I managed to make some ink and make some pen and, of course, toilet paper. And then I used to be supplied with cigarettes. And I wrote also, those things where the paper inside there.
Didn't they notice the huge volume of toilet paper you were going through?
Well, I think they must have thought I had diarrhea and sympathetic.
In 1986, the Nobel Committee recognized you as a man, quote, who in a wide cultural perspective and with poetic overtones fashions the drama of existence, and awarded you the Nobel Prize in Literature, making you the first African to receive that prize. Why do you think it took so long for the wider world to recognize this talent in Africa?
I don't know. Because there was already sufficient literature coming out of Africa. So it's not as if they were not deserving writers. Why? You have to ask those grey men of the Literary Academy of the Nobel Institution.
You dedicated your Nobel Prize lecture to Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned at the time, and spoke out against the racist apartheid state. And that speech that you did, "This past must address its present," is sort of credited with building such a global emotion, public emotion, that it ultimately led to the serious fall of apartheid through the release of Nelson Mandela in 1992. Is that the case? Do you think it created that kind of momentum?
No, it was part of. I don't think that in itself did, but I believe that from conversation, discussions, and so on, I think it played its small role in galvanizing world opinion. At least I like to think so. I believe so.
Along with the numerous accolades, of course, you faced criticism from time to time. One being that you write and you communicate in English, and sometimes for being too much of a Europhile. How do you address those critics?
Well, I always say to them that I was colonized in English. The language, the common language out of about 300 languages in Nigeria happens to be the colonial language, English. Language for me is just a tool. It's just a tool. It's a means of communication, nothing more. And one can also refurbish that tool, even for those to whom it properly belongs. So I've never had any angst about that. The important thing for me is to be able to communicate in whatever is the most convenient manner. The language of coups in Nigeria, and coups have been part of my adult life, and the adult life of most Nigerians, the language of coup is English. The language of the markets is the kind of English, broken English, with twist English, use it whichever way you want. But I also write in Yoruba, little poems, my songs and so on, I also write in Yoruba.
Your writings have, of course, been so outspoken. You have stood your ground. And that, of course, has put you in danger so many times. You were sentenced to death in absentia. You've had to, live in exile. And I wonder when people have thought that perhaps the Nobel Prize would give you some kind of protection. I know you yourself were quoted as saying, some people think that the Nobel Prize makes you bulletproof. I never had that illusion. Do you still feel a sense that there is some kind of threat out there to you?
Oh yes, yes, but it's manageable threat. For instance, I know I've been in recent times very, very hard down on religious fundamentalists. I mean, you must have read of all the killings in Nigeria. It's still going on as we speak now. And as an intellectual, somebody who at least, who has a historic sense, I've always considered it my duty to trace this phenomenon back to its original cause and to bring the causes, to push people's faces in the mess that they have created, either thoughtlessly or through hegemonic thinking, through political cheating, political opportunism. I have watched the growth of extremism, of a really brutal kind in Nigeria. I mean, I grew up in the charming atmosphere, religious-wise, of a harmony of believers. And then I grow old into the reversal of what it should be, when that harmonized existence should be strengthened all the time as people become more globally sophisticated and they see what's happening, and the opposite. And so I've said things, directly, and I know there are certain areas, I mean, they've threatened, they've said it, I know them. I'm not troubled at all by them. But I must continue, informing, and educating and reminding people, because people like to forget.
In 1994, you became a UN Goodwill Ambassador for UNESCO, in actual fact, to promote African culture, human rights, freedom of expression, media and communication. How much have you been able to use that position?
It's first of all, it's not a very formal thing. It's a question of wherever you can, you do what you can, and you involve UNESCO. I have been able to bring to the attention of UNESCO a number of cultural events which have been overlooked. The educational program, for instance, I'm involved in that. It's part and parcel of just one's normal activities. The only difference is that you can do it with the backing of UNESCO. Once you contact them, they listen to you.
Of course, you've spent so many years away from Nigeria in exile, under threat and so on. How much, has that broken, I guess, your connection with your homeland? How much has it made it suffer?
Well, my problem, in fact, is that I've never felt at home anywhere except home in Abeokuta. And so I always carry Nigeria around with me to the distress of my family. I've never felt a break. The expression I used when I was compelled to go into exile was that I was merely on a political sabbatical. And at the end of it, I'll be returning home. And I've been back since, and I don't think I missed a beat on reintegrating myself physically.
You feel there's been any price to pay, for taking a stand, the fact you have death threats, the fact you have the exile? Has it been a too high a price?
Yes, that takes its toll in many ways. You become a nomad, but at the same time you learn to maximize your periods of repose, of creativity. You develop a totally new rhythm of working. That's one of the first things you do, and I think the biggest prize has been not being able to do what you want to do at the time you want to do it and how you want to do it. The number of times, for instance, when I would prefer to be in my study or workshop, as I call it, in Nigeria, working there rather than in the United States, totting up frequent flyer miles, is only useful for my children. And I set up a foundation for them. Frequent Flyer Family Foundation, quadruple F, things like that. So there are things which you resent, but ultimately you survive.
What goals and targets have you set yourself for the coming years?
I have work things I'm working on. If I have any one target, golden target, is really to be able to withdraw completely, totally, and just look at the rest of the world.
Well, you say you want to be buried in a cactus patch at your home.
Yes.
But I wonder what sort of legacy you'd like to leave behind. How would you like people to remember you?
No, that's the problem of those I leave behind. They will decide what kind of legacy I've left behind. No, I don't bother my head with that one. No. Let them extract whatever they want.
Wole Soyinka, thank you very much. What a pleasure.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you, sir.